Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. I appreciate you having an informational session on this. It was about 7 years ago, I think, when the issue was brought to my attention by my constituent, whose parents, unfortunately, were in an assisted living facility and passed because of the carbon monoxide release that ultimately killed them. And we found out at that point, after having a informational hearing in 2008, that the Department of Public Welfare was about 1.5 to 2 years behind in inspecting facilities, let alone trying to implement the new standards of installing carbon monoxide detectors. So what's happened since that time and now? One, obviously, we have not passed legislation with these requirements. What have we done proactively? The department has clearly stepped up their inspection process. There are many facilities that are not here any longer because of that inspection process. But in the meantime, I want to thank staff for working with myself and the care facility providers to come up with the language that's in front of you today. I think it's important that we address this for those elderly citizens of our state, but also employees that are working in these facilities as well. I know there are some perhaps technical questions or technical changes to the legislation that might be introduced. I know Representative DeLisio has another meeting this morning that she has to attend, and she raised a couple of points with me prior to this that she'd like to see changes possibly in the language, or at least have that discussion about those changes, which is fair. I want to thank the provider organizations for really being very, very cooperative and writing letters of support for the language that's in the legislation, and I think you'll hear that from them as well. But at this time, I'd like two families that were impacted by the lack of having detectors in the facilities make their comments to you.
Okay, before we take reps.
Good morning. My name is Mary Ann Rose, and I reside at 1732 Hassom Road
Could you get a little closer to the microphone, Mary Ann?
in Moon Township, Pennsylvania, which is in Allegheny County. I would like to thank Chairman Hennessy and all the distinguished members of the Aging and Older Adult Services Committee for allowing me to speak regarding House Bill 264. I would also like to thank Representative Mustio, who has persisted in his attempts to pursue legislation requiring carbon monoxide detectors in long-term care facilities, personal care homes, and assisted living residences who utilize fossil fuel heating sources emitting carbon monoxide as a byproduct of combustion. I spoke with him early in 2007 following the deaths of my parents, and he continues with his efforts to pursue this legislation. This legislation has become a personal crusade for me and members of my family due to the preventable tragedy that led to the deaths of my parents, David and Regina Householder. They were overcome by high levels of carbon monoxide while residing in their Beaver County, Pennsylvania assisted living facility. The incident occurred almost 8 years ago on February 21st, 2007. Due to a faulty boiler beneath their suite that had not been properly inspected. Both of my parents were severely impacted and suffered significantly due to the effects of carbon monoxide poisoning. My dad died 2 weeks following the incident, and my mom succumbed 3 weeks later. My objective is simple: to do all I can do to enable legislation that will prevent the needless deaths of other elderly, disabled Pennsylvanians due to the lack of carbon monoxide detection systems in facilities with care-dependent residences. On that day, there were multiple residents taken to 2 area hospitals that were placed in disaster mode due to the potential risk that multiple people that were affected. Fortunately, those other residents were treated and released. My parents, David and Regina Householder, they were in their 80s and while elderly, had a lot to live for. They were so happy when my husband and I brought their great-grandchildren to visit. Their joyfulness was plain and to see in their smiling faces and sparkle in their eyes. There could have been many other moments had this not happened. My cousin Mary Smithson and I previously testified before this committee on May 6, 2008, in favor of then House Bill 1952. The committee listened intently to our testimony. Unfortunately, there was resistance by other entities that were present to testify on that date. We found it unbelievable that these groups were resistant to an effort that would save the lives of our frail, disabled, and elderly residents who reside in residential care facilities. Since that time, there have been a number of newspaper articles recounting other incidences of carbon monoxide poisoning resulting in serious injury and death. It's hard for me to believe the danger still exists in residential care facilities. I don't pretend to be an expert, but it's my understanding that these detectors are inexpensive, can be easily installed, and are effective in alerting that a carbon monoxide danger is present. Why is it so difficult to pass this legislation requiring these devices be installed in these facilities? Other House bills have been introduced over the years, which Sharon has mentioned, and were never voted into law or never left committee. It's unbelievable to me that we have been unable to pass this legislation that would protect our Pennsylvania residents. I do have some statistics here. I'm not going to announce them all because I think another committee may be doing it, but I do want you to know that Pennsylvania does lead the nation in accidental carbon monoxide poisoning deaths. And also of importance is that by the year 2020, Pennsylvania will have a population of over 60 and older of 3 million people. And last year, in 2014, there were 5 deaths in Allegheny County from carbon monoxide exposure. These statistics show there would be a very high risk for carbon monoxide poisoning if the homes are careless, do not perform routine maintenance on their systems, and do not include carbon monoxide detectors in their facilities. In Moon Township, Pennsylvania, where I reside, we have multiple group homes housing elderly and disabled citizens that are in single-family dwellings that potentially could be at risk also for carbon monoxide poisoning. Recently in the Pittsburgh area, just as recently as December 8th, there was an incident in Duquesne, Pennsylvania, where a resident of Autumn Commons Assisted Living Center was hospitalized due to the exposure of carbon monoxide. There were several other residents evacuated due to this leak. Now, there is a carbon monoxide alarm standards, which is Act 121, which passed through the Senate and the House in 2013, and I commend our legislatures for working on this action. This will make it mandatory for property owners in multifamily dwellings and rental units to have carbon monoxide detectors in place by June of this year. However, still, our most vulnerable citizens, elderly, frail, and disabled Pennsylvanians living together in various types of group residences, are still not protected. And I know that there is a House bill recently introduced by Senator Wayne Fontana, also Senate bills in 2014, which never passed. My hope is that the Aging and Older Adult Service Committee will give this proposed legislation its total support and make every effort to ensure that it becomes the law of our Commonwealth. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to make sure that House Bill 264 passes during this legislative session and can move on to the Senate to make this a reality. It's very important to offer Pennsylvanians the safety that no other resident of a residential care facility will die tragically from the results of the carbon monoxide poisoning. Thanks again to all the committee members and to Representative Mustio for permitting me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.